Sensational. Now I've got someone else to do this. Brilliant. All right. Well, it is a presentation. It's going to be a tough gig. Hopefully now it's going to improve. So today's presentation is in some ways a bit tough. It's looking at a complex solution that you need to provide in a simple form. It's a little bit similar to what Jenny was talking about yesterday with Douglas Shire, particularly when your users are the public, you know, and the need to be able to present that information to them. In this, I'll give a bit of a background on us, where we're coming from in probably some of the context of the foundation behind the project, some of the complexity in that process, and then really what our aim was to distill and simplify the outcomes for the users. To start with, I'm not from around here. I dodged this weather bullet on Monday morning in Hobart, where we're from. I was sitting in Whitsunday when I got these photos sent through to me, which was very nice. Shot on the far left's taken from my balcony from my daughters, who eventually 11 o'clock when they got out of bed after their uni exams took for me. The other shots from the inner suburbs of Hobart. And the one on the right is Tina, my office manager, took that one outside a kitchen window Monday morning. She didn't actually make the office till about lunchtime because she was snowed in. Yep, summer's 2 weeks away. We do have slightly different weather patterns. There is blue skies on the far left-hand screen, but Hobart is the second driest capital in Australia. So there's a bit of trivia. So for next year, question for the Spatial Olympics. I've just given the answer, so there's a need to come next year. So you can just answer that question. You're going to have to be pretty good to beat the team that won last night in the Educated GIS. All right, we've done well. All right. Okay, about us. Okay, we began in about 1990. That's a slightly younger version, and may I say a slightly slimmer version of me. In those days when we first started, we were using PC ArcInfo 3.4D, MapInfo for DOS, and that's, I think, MapInfo version about 1.3 there, so very early days. By 1990, we'd actually developed the first internet application using MapInfo technology. It was technology at the time called ProServer. We actually were the first ones to put anything out public. That morphed into a few other things. There's a few shots of me in this. I feel like Scott Morrison. In that, we created an app which used MapXtreme Java along with open source to the Coastal Freshwater and Ecosystems Value Atlas. We won a Tasmanian IT award for it and also got internationally recognised by Pitney Bowes at the time. Morph into more recent things, we've won Spatial Excellence Awards for an app we did around walkability out of a local government in Hobart and also Marine Safety Tasmania. We did an application for them, this time with open source. So we're a strong partner of Precisely Software, as it's now known, but we also use open source. So sometimes it's horses for courses, and in this particular case we did it with Leaflet. Alrighty, local government is where we mainly play. We are a partner precisely with their transition now. We're responsible for about 80 clients across the country. We're covering Queensland, South Australia, naturally Tasmania, Western Australia, Northern Territory. We've got a bit in New South Wales as well. So that tends to be the space. We do a lot in the online mapping area, and if you want to have a look at some of our websites that we've done and our presentations, sites, go to discovercommunities.com.au. Alrighty, the way we tend to look at an organisation with GIS, we look at it as being part of an ecosystem. But the beauty of it as a map, as we know, location is so good as a sort of centralised information portal for everything else. But integration for us is the key. We'll either do it sort of application to application or database to database. But certainly from a local government perspective, where property is the primary focus, it's important that you be able to integrate in those systems. Otherwise, you really just got, dare I say, a dumb GIS. You need something that needs to integrate. Alrighty, and for that sake, we've done a lot into some of the local government systems. If you're in local government here, you'll probably be aware of some of these. Property and rating, asset management are the keys, a little bit into content manager with Microfocus, and so forth. Alrighty, just going to change up a bit and give a bit of a background to what I'm about to talk about. Also, the fact is this presentation I put together a few months ago was 10 minutes long. Desiree said you got 30 minutes, so I thought I had to pad it out a bit here. So I've had it a little bit. All right, so the reason for this is that we were the mapping agency for the Sydney Hobart yacht race for about 10 years. The yachts used to radio their skeds. We would create the maps either for the information system centre, call centres and national media. So we're on the back page of the Australian every morning over Christmas and sharing it with the Ashes tests. And also the 10 Network used to have an update on their national sports program of a night time, so we have to create maps. You'll notice land file there because it was originally a land file before it became Insight GIS. What happened was in 1998, which was a lead into before, there was an incident where a huge load came through Bass Strait, and you would have seen that in the earlier presentation. What happened, about 6 sailors lost their lives. This shot on the far right there shows the indication of the storm and the location of the fleet at the time. We're talking about 30, 40 metre seas. Guys were getting rescued off boats where basically the helicopter go down, pick up a guy, and they had to go up because otherwise the helicopter was going to get taken out by a wave. So we're talking about huge. Because of all our work, New South Wales Police got us involved to do all the mapping for the inquest. It's the biggest inquest in maritime history in New South Wales. And the key was here we were mapping for them wind strength and direction, wave height, currents, sea surface temperature, where incidents were happening like boats sinking, sailors getting washed overboard. At the time we then had to create a number of maps during that fateful afternoon in which all this happened. But again, location-based information was a great way of distilling down the information, providing a clear story. I was actually the first witness, expert witness, standing in front of 6 QCs, which was quite an experience. And so this is a bit nerve-wracking. That day was a little bit more nerve-wracking. But what it did was for them, and probably for anyone else involved in the inquest, it provided that story of what actually happened, and then that not only chronologically they knew what was occurring, but they also knew spatially where it was occurring and why. All right. Yesterday we talked about tractors. Today I'm going to add up Lamborghinis and Dodge Vipers. A little bit of different hardware here, not your normal laptop. This is about 750k of motor car there. So we're involved with White Hot Racing and their Targa Motorsport. We've put a mapping system into started off a Nissan Skyline, then went to a Lamborghini, and then it was gone to a Dodge Viper. So I'm just going to play a little video here, but again, what it is simply a map info at 250 kilometres an hour on a tough book. On the left-hand side, the guy navigating's got basically a map up here with all his notes, with the outline of the course, and he actually owns the car. His nephew actually drives it, and he's communicating what's actually happening. So hopefully this will go.
We're playing through the HDMI.
Doesn't matter. We'll let it go. So this is in the Adelaide Hills on a rainy day. And so he's having to shout instructions. You don't actually hear it. They're actually in the air there at about 100 k's an hour. Alrighty. So for me, what that shows is it's a little bit different than what you'd see in a strawberry patch around our part of the country. It's a great one to throw at kids and say, this is what we do. If you want something, if you Google Jason White Lamborghini or Jason White Targa, you'll probably see a fair few of these videos, and they vary in length up to about 8 minutes. So, alrighty. The key there, if I just go back on that, is that, again, it was a case of putting a whole heap of information that was simplified, so a guy navigating, all right, could be telling his nephew where he'd go simply as the GPS connected, and as the car moved, and as soon as it got on certain margins around the screen, it recentered. There's other applications we built in, like an electronic stopwatch and that sort of thing, and in fact, that what actually helped them win the first race we put in. They actually won it because we showed that they were about 16 seconds quicker, and they won up by 7 seconds. So they were very happy with us. it's good because the guy actually owns a brewery as well, so and a winery and a distillery, and he's about 15 minutes up the road from my shack on the east coast of Tassie, so great site location. So anyway, Glenorchy City Council is a project we did around opportunity mapping. Glenorchy's a city council just north of Hobart City, still underneath the throes of our mountain there. It's your typical small to medium-sized local government, and typically socio-economically at the lower end than the higher end of town, more a Townsville than a Cairns. So, that's sort of the way it is. Just quickly, they build very big ferries there. These from Incat, they're about 100 metres long, and they ply the waters around the world. There's one in Ireland that they've called the Vomit Comet because they tend to go through the wave, not over it. And so, The other thing is, if you have a favourites from Cadbury's, often it's probably been made, packaged and sent to you from Hobart, from the factory down there. And the other one which you've ever seen is called Mona, which is the Museum of Old and New Art. So it's actually about, $300-400 million worth of a private museum built by a guy whose occupation is a professional gambler. So, it's certainly weird. A lot of his exhibitions are centred on sex and death. So, it's certainly different, but he's probably single-handedly totally kick-started the Tasmanian tourism industry about 10 years ago. So it's free to go in for locals and even those from other parts of this world. The cost isn't much. So it's an interesting place, and he grew up in this area and decided basically tunnelled out a 3-storey building underneath a hill. So the whole thing's underground. It's a massive 3-storey high museum. So, who said there wasn't money in gambling? All right. Okay, so Glenorchy itself. This was it was an exciting project. So Glenorchy came up with an initiative called Future Glenorchy, and the two main initiatives behind it, or goals, was growing Glenorchy. They wanted to get a message out. So from an economic development and looking at land use within the city, they wanted to create a vision about being open for business. The other one was that they wanted to improve livability, so very much around making lives better, valuing the environment, and like any local government, they're community focused. And so that was a big call as well. So around open spaces, parks, facilities. Out of it, one of the things that they realised was they had a lot of investors or developers coming to their front counter and say, look, we're interested in developing land. They had to engage council staff in those sort of discussions. So what they wanted to do, council, was to look at better informing the end user, looking at saving time or increasing the level of discussion. So it wasn't at sort of an introductory level when they stepped in. Glenorchy is very rich in geospatial data. They've been using GIS technology for about 30 years now. And so they had a lot of data. We're also blessed with a state government system that's also very mature. But they didn't have any sort of mapping tool specific for assisting those developers and those investors. And that's where we stepped in. So what we did was we had to look at 4 opportunities that they want to look at. One was affordable housing, which is a big initiative amongst local government. Medium to high density residential, commercial and industrial. So I'm very much around looking at how can we increase the economic base within the municipality. There was 2 sides to it. One was hard copy opportunity maps, and we're looking at there really at providing a high level overall view of the local government area. It's also great eye candy for councillors if they've got a big map to look at. An easy and effective way to sort of communicate where land was viable. And also it provided some initial prototypes for when we then started looking at the mapping portal. So the second part was more drill down to a property level to look at the various properties. It complemented more their open for business process, and also sort of could also play a role in strategy for growth. So maybe down the track, they haven't done it, not quite there yet, about being able to update the data to reviewing the opportunities. Okay, so there was buckets loads of geospatial data. We had in this process about 80 layers of spatial data to look at. Research through a good data dictionary, a data registry, when you've got certainly a lot more than 80 layers within the council, made it possible for us to categorise. So what we did, we looked at 5 contexts. We look at land use, so zoning, lot sizes. Obviously, the larger the lot size, the more properties you can develop on it. Vacancy, land ownership, also whether it was owned by state government or local government, and then be the opportunity of developing in that land. Infrastructure, so proximity to services, water, sewerage, gas, so forth. Road networks. We sourced that data from respective sort of state authorities that had that sort of data. Service proximities, and that was across community services, health, welfare, public transport, bikeways, sport grounds, bike paths, and their accessibility. And generally what we were doing now was looking at properties that were within either 400 or 800 metres from those services, because that's how far you can walk in 5 or 10 minutes. So that was there. Then constraints about what you can't do on the land due to it being heritage, landslip, bushfire prone, and so forth. And demographics. So we use CIFA data there. Obviously around affordable housing, you're looking at areas where there's a lower socio-economic groups. So they were the 5 contexts we put together. Really looking at it, the only choice here was, if you're going to come up with some sort of decision making, was going to be challenging. Cartography at the end of the day with the output was also going to be pretty difficult in what we had to produce. So we needed to simplify down the amount of data. We needed to blend it, analyse it, and make it consumable in that process. Really, multi-criteria analysis was the only way to go. We'd worked on a project similar to this before around bushfire risk assessment, looked at a whole range of things, another project similar to that. So we had a history in working on that sort of thing. So we looked at taking that approach. Okay, this starts where it's getting complex. So this behind the scenes, this is where the GIS geeks step in. So we looked at the 4 scenarios, and I'll try and talk through this. From there, we then looked at each of the contexts, as I mentioned on the previous slide, and then we analysed each layer based on those contexts. And we calculated a weight on its relationship. So I'll give an example here. If the property was fully serviced by water, it was given a particular weighted score. Then it was compared to other layers within that context to look at the relative importance and so the data was then normalised. Then the weights were added together and we calculated contexted weight. So I'll explain this it would probably take longer than 30 minutes to get through all of this in some respects. So it's always one of the things, how much do I talk about this and confuse people? And sometimes I think it's better to keep it short and confuse people than spend half an hour doing it. So, alrighty. Okay, so just talking through this, what we've got here is the scenario around high and medium density. And so we use storyboarding and work with local government here. So we spent a lot of time talking to their planners, their strategic planners. There wasn't a GIS person in the room. Sorry about that, guys, but you need to talk to the end user more. So we were talking to them. We looked at really developing a number of storyboards. So we took the view that if a developer walked in, what would he say at the front counter? And then, so we basically narrated their question. We want to develop land, within your municipality around affordable housing or medium high density. Then we translated it into GIS speak, which was basically select all the properties within zoning and all the other properties that are vacant. And from there, more spatial speak. All right, if it's fully overlaid, we gave it a weighted value of 10 out of 10. So weights went from 1 to 10. So we went through 80 layers of information, dealing in this case around land use and then increasing it. All righty. So very quickly, this is an abbreviated version of one of the tables. So looking at it, property layers, overlay water and sewerage. Generally speaking, it was either fully or none. So it would give you a value of 10. We then look at the importance of the various layers under infrastructure proximity here. Said to council, what's the most important, what's the least important? From that, we ranked them, and then we said, okay, we need to say up to a value of 100 in importance, what value you'll put against them. They gave us some values, and then we calculated the opportunity value. What did that relate to? Well, in this little abbreviated example, in this particular property, it hasn't got any water services over it, so it's got a value of 0. It's fully serviced for sewer, so it's 25. It's got stormwater, it's within about 100 metres of headworks, and so forth. We then use that, and for that particular property, it's got a opportunity value of 65. From there, we then threw it in along with land use, service proximity, constraints and demography for each layer, for each property, and we came up with this. So this is hopefully where it gets simple. So what we've done is basic for each property. It's got an opportunity value for each of those 4 scenarios between 1 and 10, and it's coloured accordingly. And we've got various colours for affordable housing and so forth. We chose 10 instead of 5 because if you're an owner of a property, a value between 5 and 4 or 4 and 3, it's quite a difference to a landowner, possibly. So we thought if we increase, it's not so much of a worry if you're a 6 instead of a 7. So we sort of extended it a little bit there to give a less relativity, but less difference, if you like, between the various properties. Now, alrighty. So we then create a number of these AO maps. The benefit for this, as part from the eye candy, it did give that council a whole view on what was happening across their municipality. It also enables them to say, well, how do we want to increase the opportunity for affordable housing? What do we got to do in an area? It means we've got to increase the infrastructure services? Do we have to improve the community services? What do we have to do to increase that opportunity? So it provided an opportunity to strategically look at it. On the other side of it, this is on the Glenorchy website. So the point here, and I'll just talk through this video. So we go into affordable housing. We've got the structures down there. We're working on a better UI than this. But generally speaking, go in, developer may decide, all right, I want to choose lots between 5 and 1,800. That gives them up to about 3 or 4 parcels they want to subdivide. They can zoom in, have a look around. And then the context that I gave before are provided below this. They get some basic information about the property, what the zoning is, whether it's vacant or not, that proximity, so they know it's fully serviced, how far the stormwater and the gas is, also the services, so that I mentioned previously, if there's any constraints on it, and finally the CIFA index at the bottom. So that just gives them a bit of a feel. I think there it's about a number 9 as far as opportunity, so that gives them an idea of the opportunity if they want to go down an affordable housing option, that's certainly a possibility. The other one here is they might want to look at medium to high density. So they'll just re-enter the address here. Choose the same property. It's reasonably high. And I think it's got an opportunity of 7 or 8. I can't quite see it on this screen. So again, if they wanted to look at probably providing a different type of development, they've got that option. Alrighty. If you want a closer look, that's where it is. We're in the process at the moment of moving this. This was, dare I say, written all in basic scripts. We're moving this into FME to make it more flexible and we can update a lot more. I've got someone, a uni graduate at the moment with us working on moving this all into FME. The UX needs to be worked on at the moment. This is sort of version 1 that we wanted to get up. The critical point here was a simple but important requirement. There was a complexity certainly in putting all those 80 layers into just one single layer of information and then creating a simple output. So that was really the point behind it. One of my favourite, one of the quotes I like the most is this, is certainly when it comes to getting information, particularly out to the public, you've got to make it simple. The challenge for us very often is being able to put that information, incredible amount of information and all the processes we do into a very simple message. Otherwise we just lose them. I think there's enough public web mapping portals out there that look like a full-on GIS. So it's one of the things I'm really, really tight on. Special thanks to Glenorchy City Council for the support and the opportunity to do this project. We're looking at doing more work with them. There's been a bit of serendipity, that's it. But also love the tagline for fungus when I saw this. So yeah, apart from that, thanks folks. Good. No.
You kind of answered it towards the end there. I was just wondering, like, you know, based on property data, how do you go when that changes, you know, like if there are subdivisions or there are changes?
Yeah.
That's where FME would come in and try to...
Yeah, so we want to turn this in, and this is really the first one that we threw up there. Something like, yeah, we needed to look at improving that, and that sort of technology is really good for that sort of stuff, because we want to, and we also want to give them the opportunity. If you look at some of those weights in that storyboarding, so you sit down with someone from council and go, okay, this is the weights we want to put. What if they want to change it? What if they want to make, you know, sewer and water have a greater, you know, how do you then change the model? So we want to add that sort of flexibility into it, so they've got the opportunity of using it more for strategic planning. And so it's not just a case of, for example, the land planning schemes get updated, or there's new infrastructure that's put in looking at those sort of things that organically happen, but it's also an opportunity for them to use it more as a tool for strategic planning. So yeah. Thanks, folks.